Hello? Hello? Hey man, how's it going? Congrats on the new job. Listen, you mind hearing me out on this theory I have? You ever think about the fact that Five Nights at Freddy's and Kingdom Hearts are kinda just the same thing? Just listen to me on this. I mean, not like you're going anywhere, right?
Think about it. These are both series that have become kinda infamous for starting off pretty simple, but gradually evolving into these overcomplicated monstrosities that basically require hours of video essays and lore dumps just to get a grasp on the overarching plot. Years and years of unanswered questions and retcons and plot threads that get set up and never really followed up on have left both of these franchises in a very strange spot. And you know what the funny thing is? When you break it down, neither of these games are actually even that complicated. I mean, okay, hear me out. The plot of both the original 4 FNaF games and the original 4 Kingdom Hearts games are actually pretty simple. In FNaF, we see Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria in its twilight years, on the edge of collapse due to a number of vague incidents. In FNaF 2, we learn more about why that is. A deranged serial killer used his position at the pizzeria to cover gruesome murders he committed on isolated children. In FNaF 3, we confront the murderer head-on and ultimately get the whole building burned down with him inside. FNaF 4 is a bit of an oddity, but you can ultimately look at it as a side story that delves into more depth about the many horrible things that happened at Freddy Fazbear's. Kingdom Hearts, similarly, follows a pretty simple plot progression in its first 4 games. Sora and his friends get their world torn up by a big evil shadow man, so Sora has to go kick his ass. He has to climb a castle and meets a bunch of new villains, then goes to sleep for a while. He wakes up, and then he has to kick the ass of the big evil shadow man's alternate self. And in Days, which is also kind of just a side story, we learn more about Roxas, Sora's own alternate self who went through a lot of very messed up things. Obviously, I'm simplifying. Like a lot. There's a lot more to the story than the broad strokes, and it's in the weeds that these stories have kind of gained their infamy. Every single entry raises more questions than they answer, and that's very much by design. How many kids did the murderer kill? What year does the bite take place in FNaF 4? Is there any significance to the identity of the Night Guards? Who exactly were the members of Organization 13 when they were alive besides Xemnas? And what the hell happened to Sora's mom? The thing about all of these questions is that they ultimately don't matter. At all. How many children the murderer killed is as important as understanding who Demyx was before he became a nobody. Which is to say, these answers are completely unimportant to understanding the plots of these games. If these plot points are ever made important, they will be made explicit, and any theorizing about them just does not matter at all. And I don't say that to make fun of theorizers or say it's stupid. I love theorizing myself, and I have tons of theories and headcanons and ideas about the works I love. But ultimately, I don't think even Scott Cawthon himself knows how many children have had their souls imprinted onto animatronics. The answer to that question is ultimately just whatever number is necessary to make the plot of the next game work. And because a hard answer to that question has never been necessary, it's just been left kind of vague and difficult to discern. And again, that's all on purpose. I don't want to call any game theory bait, but if any had to bear that moniker, get it? FNaF is a good candidate, and Kingdom Hearts is not far behind. Kingdom Hearts creator Tetsuya Nomura has always been pretty honest about the fact that he just makes shit up as he goes along for the Kingdom Hearts plotline. He typically only has an idea of where he wants to take the sequel, which results in the famous secret movies that have appeared in most Kingdom Hearts titles. And to his credit, this normally works out pretty decently for him. You could still find forum posts from the early to mid-2000s, before I even had functioning long-term memory, discussing who the mysterious blonde-haired kid, or BHK, was before Kingdom Hearts 2 released. That's what they called Roxas back then, because we didn't even know his name. Scott Cawthon has applied a pretty similar line of thinking to how he designs the FNaF games, but he's overall much more insidious about it. I don't want to say he's, evil, but I think he's overall much more conscious of fan theorists and how important it is to keeping his franchise alive. That's why so much of the fine details of the FNaF plot are incredibly vague and super easy to miss. It is designed to fuel discussion and theorizing, while also providing plot threads that can be picked up in the future if needed. It's like most of the story stuff in FNaF is designed with the same principles as the Kingdom Hearts secret movies. It's vague and lacks hard answers on purpose.
No, look, man, I'm not trying to be super negative here. I like FNaF, and I genuinely love Kingdom Hearts. I'm saying all this stuff more as facts of how these things are designed. and these design choices aren't negative in and of themselves. And if you like the analysis, maybe pull up my channel on your monitor and subscribe. It really helps me out.
I said the first 4 games in both of these sagas form a pretty sensible story by themselves, and I said that because I think it's in the 5th game where things started going off the rails a bit. That's not to shit on Sister Location or Birth by Sleep, but I think it's in both of these games where we start to see both of these series start to fall a little too in love with their own lore. Birth by Sleep is where the series started getting a bit egregious with Master Xehanort as a character and his sheer number of backstories. Ansem and Xemnas were pretty simple characters, both offshoots of the same man who attained knowledge that corrupted him and made him lust for the power within, desperate to possess what lay within Kingdom Hearts by any means necessary. But now Xehanort is also an old and wizened Keyblade master, and also there's a younger version of him that was also corrupted by an even older and more evil guy, and on top of that, he's also the reincarnation of the player character from the mobile game. And he's got an entire extra story arc in another mobile game. Seriously, this guy has more backstories than Apollo Justice at this point. That's not to let FNaF off easy, of course. Sister Location came out sometime after the first FNaF novel, and I think we can definitely see the influence of that starting here. Hell, we have the murderer's name from the novels canonized, William Afton. The games from this point on become much more concerned with telling a more explicit story that's less hidden behind obtuse minigames. As well, we begin to see the series lose some of its grimy industrial aesthetic and embrace more sci-fi elements. The animatronics now speak to you, and frequently. There are more fantastical elements, like animatronics scooping out people's skeletons and puppeteering their bodies. And of course, we begin to see the transformation of William Afton, from a deranged serial killer who used his position to hide his crimes, to more of a mad scientist and genius engineer, who is not only responsible for designing Freddy Fazbear's animatronics, but made them with the express purpose of killing as many kids as possible. Now, I don't want to treat any of these elements as bad on their face. There's definitely something compelling about how both of these villains are portrayed. Xehanort becomes almost this unstoppable force of nature, with an inhuman grasp on the dark arts, always having some trick up his sleeve to come back and start vying for power right after his many defeats. He may lose, a lot, but every defeat only inches him closer to his victory, and he only needs to win once to win forever. That's genuinely interesting. And similarly, I don't think mad scientist sorcerer William Afton is a bad concept from the jump. A man whose depravity is so great that he accidentally stumbles on ways to create inhuman forms of life, simply as a byproduct of the torture he loves inflicting on innocent children. He learns to harness it, master it, and his sadism only grows as he discovers greater ways to torment his victims, not even in pursuit of power, but simply to satiate his desire to hurt others. And even when his deeds catch up to him, he revels in it. He almost refuses to leave the mortal coil, even as his body is mangled beyond repair and he's stuck inhabiting a twisted mockery of his life's work, because his desire to torment the innocent is that strong. That's scary and effective. Plus, I like how they weave his family into it and make it clear that his crimes have hurt everyone around him, not just the people he targeted. The problems start to arise because these characterizations of both villains were kind of retroactively applied. Ansem and Xemnas are not the same characters that Xehanort is. And of course that's true in Universe 2, but Xehanort has a pretty wild fluctuation from a pretty standard Disney villain to a fucking Batman-level schemer who was totally planning all of this right from the very jump. Just trust me, bro. It's a pretty wild jump in characterization, and not even something I think was fully finalized in Birth by Sleep. It's not even until Dream Drop Distance that they try to backpedal and say, oh no guys, him getting his ass kicked all those other times was totally cool. It was all just secretly leading up to his big ultimate plan. It's just kind of hard to swallow when that's something presented to you that you're supposed to accept wholesale in the second to last full game before he stops being the main villain. And similarly, Afton has a pretty noticeable divergence in character from the original 4 games to Sister Location and onward. There's really nothing in these first few games to point to Afton's later characterization. He comes across as more of a grunt, a regular security guard who abused his position to isolate and murder children, with all of the supernatural elements being an unintended consequence of that. Once he suffered the same fate he inflicted on his victims, it's agonizing. You can see him trying to rip the mask off of his face just because of how much it hurts. him becoming Springtrap is a nightmare of his own making.
So, Afton is like some kind of dangerous zombie, just shambling around and acting solely based on his instincts. But then the games after FNaF 3 kind of muck with that, and start making him into a genuine supervillain.
It's always felt like kind of a weird transition, but I'm not going to pretend like I don't know why it happens. FNaF and Kingdom Hearts are both examples of serialized storytelling, works that incorporate an overarching narrative that's told over a period of time. Of course, this is quite a broad category, and serialized storytelling can and has been used to tell many, many amazing stories over the years. But I think with these two franchises, we begin to see some of the weaknesses of that format, and how it can result in something that feels kinda jumbled and messy. No writer develops a story with a clear-cut, full idea of how the entire thing is going to go. But with FNaF and Kingdom Hearts, it's obvious both Scott Cawthon and Nomura weren't really sure what the overarching plans for their stories were. They were kinda just making stuff up as they went along, and that resulted in having to do a lot of backfilling to explain inconsistencies, set up future plot developments, and try to plant the seeds that would sprout into the plots of future entries in the franchise. And with both of these series, I think there was natural sense in using their villains as the connective tissue. Sora is a character without much potential to backfill his past, given he was purely an islander before the events of the first game, and the FNaF security guards are rarely characters at all. But hey, both Xehanort and William Afton have pretty large holes in their backstories and characterization that can be filled in to power the plots of future games, even if you may have to incorporate some time travel, or amnesia, or soul magic to make it work. This happens surprisingly often with these kinds of stories in games. I mean, look at something like Metal Gear, or Resident Evil, or, I don't know, Call of Duty Zombies. Simple stories pretty rapidly explode into overcomplicated messes, and a lot of that has to do with following up on the seeds that they planted, often even accidentally. It's why there's an entire saga of the Metal Gear franchise solely dedicated to explaining why Big Boss could die in the 1987 original Metal Gear, then come back in the next game. Just like how there's a Kingdom Hearts entry that needs to devote time to explaining why Mickey wasn't wearing a shirt in the ending of the original game. Resident Evil as well has devoted a lot of time in recent years to explaining that all of the bad stuff was actually the responsibility of some random shadowy organization that was never mentioned a single time before RE7. The Connections. They were just, off screen. Like right over there. You just missed them. Now, I don't want to exclusively shit on this manner of storytelling and say Cawthon or Nomura or Kojima are all just hacks that can't write for shit. Backing yourself into a corner as a writer and having to explain things you set up without knowing the answers can often result in strokes of brilliance. For instance, you know the famous in media res opening of Season 5 of Breaking Bad, where Walter White buys a machine gun? That scene lingers over the entirety of the season, and series creator Vince Gilligan didn't even know what they were going to use it for. When they got to the second half of Season 5, he waffled on it so much that he proposed they just pretend it never happened. But they figured it out eventually, and resulted in what is often considered one of the greatest finales in television history. Scott Cawthon and Nomura may not be Vince Gilligan, but I do think this method has often led to brilliance for them. I think how William Afton is handled in the first few FNaF games is incredibly smart and effective. He's this lingering force in the background, the true source of all the pain and suffering you see, before finally coming to forefront in a game where he is the only real threat. Even once you think he's gone for good, he's still clinging on. And Nomura too has often had great success in reaping the seeds he planted with the secret movies. It's what led to characters like Roxas or the Wayfinder trio, all very beloved in their own right. There's an adage for creators: KISS, or keep it simple, stupid. Ultimately, I think both FNaF and Kingdom Hearts are at their best when they're keeping things simple and relatively grounded. FNaF's story, I think, has always been at its best and most engaging when it's not overcomplicating itself. What matters most about William Afton is that he is a monster, and becoming Springtrap only made his outside resemble who he is on the inside. His sadism drove him to tear his family apart, quite literally, and bring the company he worked for down with him. All this stuff with Agony and Remnant and Souls may make the FNaF universe a bit more unique, but I don't think these elements are at all important or necessary. At least not in how they've kind of come to dominate a lot of Afton's portrayal and motives, and thus how they've impacted the overall plot. Kingdom Hearts is very much the same way. I think the series is absolutely at its best when it's focusing on low-level human conflicts. I would say the best two written characters in this franchise by far are Roxas and Aqua, both of whom had very simple plot lines, which mostly deal with the betrayal they've suffered, the friends they've lost, and the pain they've had to endure. Even as far back as the original game, the conflict between Sora and Riku was the main emotional thrust of the game's story, not the Heartless, or Ansem, or Maleficent. I would consider it unfortunate that Kingdom Hearts began to concern itself more and more with its world-building elements, like the power of waking, or the time travel, or the super special premium deluxe Keyblade. And on the same topic, this kind of fragmented figure-it-out-as-you-go-along storytelling is also what's resulted in a lot of random breadcrumbs in these games that are either never followed up on or done in extremely unsatisfactory manners. Do you know what's in the FNaF 4 box? No? Well, neither does Scott Cawthon. And my personal example that filled me with rage as a child, King Mickey's letter from the end of Kingdom Hearts 2. The source of countless hours of speculation on forums, on YouTube, about how this all will lead into the next chapter of the franchise. I thought we were going to get an epic reveal that would lead right into Kingdom Hearts 3. And then they revealed what the letter said in fucking Coded, a game that doesn't even matter. And it was just some vague bullshit about how Sora has to go on another quest to rescue everybody. I'd be remiss not to mention a big part of why these series have become so infamous for their dense lore, which is that it's spread across a shitload of different sources. Kingdom Hearts, rather famously, has spread out all of its dozen-plus entries across many different consoles. So if you weren't lucky enough to grow up with a PS2, a DS, a PSP, and so on, you were almost certainly missing out on something going from one game to another. Thankfully, the collections available on modern hardware have done a lot to alleviate this issue. I guarantee you, if you just play the Kingdom Hearts games in release order, you will leave with a good grasp of the plot. FNaF is far worse about this, because not only is everything super obfuscated and confusing in the games themselves, but then there's the books. Like I said, the games post-FNaF 4 did take some elements from the Silver Eyes trilogy. While these books are ostensibly non-canon, there are a shitload of other books in the Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex series. These books are kind of in a weird pseudo-canon where they're superseded by the games, but elements from the books are frequently made canon in the games, or stuff from the games is only properly explained in the books. Like, Remnant as a concept was mentioned very briefly in Pizzeria Simulator, but you'd have no fucking idea what it even is if you didn't read the Fourth Closet novel. Look, I'll say it again. This stuff ultimately does not matter. In both of these series, the details in the weeds are there to fuel engagement and to give the creators seeds to potentially follow up on in the future. But what really matters about these stories is the emotional through lines and the themes and the core of their plots. Families and friendships torn apart by the works of megalomaniacal old geezers who didn't care how many people they hurt in pursuit of their goals. When you get down to it, William Afton and Xehanort are the same characters, and Five Nights at Freddy's and Kingdom Hearts are the same thing.
Jeez, man, I didn't realize how long I'd been gapping your ear off for. Just felt like I had to get all that off my chest, you know? Oh, I just remembered. You said you had to worry about power while you were on the clock? I hope me calling you on this landline isn't going to cause any problems for you.
Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you'll consider leaving a like on this video and subscribing to the channel so you'll get notified about any future content I release. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next one.